Hi, everybody. Welcome to what I'm sure will be just a great conversation about school food programs in Denmark. This is a part of a series that we've been doing, learning about school food programs around the world as we in Canada hope that our own Canadian government will finally join the G7 countries, most of the OECD countries, and actually most of the countries in the world in having a harmonized national school food program, which we do not yet have in Canada, which is quite startling given the importance of school food programs in the world and of course in our country as well, where quite a few children participate in programs, but we do not yet have national standards or national funding from our federal government. So our first session was a few months ago, and we learned about Brazil, and then we learned about Scotland and Italy. And today, we're so happy to learn about Denmark with so many wonderful experts who are joining us. It's one of the few benefits of COVID is that we have been able to imagine having these conversations with experts in their own countries and have meetings that are live like this. Today's session is being recorded. There's also English and French interpretation if you'd like it. And I just want to say a few things about where we are in Canada and then introduce you to two people who are going to help Amberley and Suvadra move us through us. Our series is organized by George Brown College, Ryerson University, sometimes being called X-University right now, the Coalition for Healthy School Food, and Food Secure Canada. We are just, for our friends in Denmark, we're right in the middle of a summer call federal election, going to the polls in just a few weeks. So our coalition is just getting ready to launch a massive, hopefully, intervention in the election where we write to all the political parties and the candidates and get commitments from them. And we're also very pleased to have just joined something, and I wonder if our friends in Denmark know of this yet and are involved, which is the Schools Meal Coalition, hosted by a variety of international organizations, which now has the signatures of 44 countries, but not Canada, led by Finland, France, the United States is involved, even Russia, many countries in the global south and north, to make a commitment that by the year 2030, all children in the world will have a healthy meal each day at school. And we're also very excited about a new a research consortium led by Dr. Donald Bundy, and we're going to have Dr. Bundy at a research meeting of ours tomorrow. And finally, we're also involved in a process, as I'm sure you are in Denmark, of looking at everything we do through the lens of SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and curious in your own work, if you can speak to this either now or in the discussion later, how you see these programs working to meet Sustainable Development Goals and which of the Sustainable Development Goals best addressed a school food program. So I'm delighted to turn it over to Suvadra first, I think. And,
Thanks, Devi. Hello, everyone. This is Suvadra. I'm a PhD candidate at the Department of Saskatchewan. So I'll start by giving a rough overview of how the webinar will proceed today. So the duration of today's webinar is 90 minutes. We'll start with roughly 1 hour of presentations from our 3 panelists, followed by a 15 to 20 minutes question and answer period. We encourage you to submit your questions throughout the webinar today using the Q&A button in the bottom corner. We also encourage you to upvote the questions that you'd like to see answered at the end of the session. Debbie, Amberley, and myself will select the top questions for our panelists to answer. So now we'll turn it over to Amberley to introduce our panelists for today.
Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Amberley Ruetz, and I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Guelph. And today I'm so pleased to introduce 3 of our esteemed guests to join us in learning about school food in Denmark. So first, with a deep knowledge and expertise regarding the food system and various stakeholders, Lena Nielsen has been in charge of designing and gathering partners for EU and large national projects in Denmark. She has a profound belief in using public kitchens as a driver towards sustainable food systems. Lena has more than 10 years of experience from various public sector institutions, such as the City of Copenhagen, the Copenhagen House of Food, and the Danish Ministry of Food, Agriculture and Fisheries. She was the project leader responsible for developing and implementing a new concept for school food in Copenhagen we'll hear more about today. For the past 5 years, she has been an independent consultant in her company, Food Cause. In 2017, she was one of 3 co-founders of CPH Food Space, which is a new environment for food startups and entrepreneurs, and she now sits as a board member of the organization. Lena has a background in political science and works in the field of policymaking, fundraising, strategic consulting concerning public government, and has been responsible for outlining action plans at the level of both projects and organizations. Thanks so much for joining us today, Lena. Next, we'll hear from Emil Kiær Lund. He is a master's in science and integrated food studies, which gives him a cross-sectional knowledge of food systems, public health nutrition, and service design. He is the coordinator and consultant of the so-called food schools in the city of Copenhagen. In the past 5 years, he has been working in depth on school food programming within the municipality. In his current role, he facilitates a network between the schools, initiates vocational training activities, and practical implementation of the city's food strategy, which is targeting a 25% reduction of CO2 footprint in public meals. There are currently 16 food schools in Copenhagen, and they have a daily production of around 6,000 meals a day. The students take part in the daily production of the food, and these food schools have an increased focus on food literacy and using food as a learning space. Thanks so much for joining us today, Emil. Last but certainly not least, we have Morten Kromann Nielsen. He is associate professor at UCL, University College in Odense, Denmark. With a background in social anthropology and youth studies, his research ranges from food literacy and garden-based learning in schools to exploring food systems as an educational framework for promoting democratic education, sustainability, inclusion, health promotion, and empowerment. He has recently completed a Ph.D. thesis on pedagogy, agency, learning, and identity construction in American youth food justice movement. Without any further ado, I will turn it over to Lena to kick off the webinar today. Thanks so much. We'll just make sure that they're spotlighted.
Thank you. And thank you very much for that very beautiful introduction. I just try to find my presentation here. Yes, we have made a program for today where I will introduce the more general terms of Danish food culture and the school food program in Denmark. And then Emil will take over and tell more about in detail about the program in Copenhagen. And then Morten will help us make some perspectives and some good advice for the Canadians when you are facing this decision-making process. So in order to understand the Danish background, you need to know that I can't differ here. Oh, yeah, good. That we have a quite long history in having food culture that are actually best known as about frugality and about effectiveness. It was very important to be full when you had a hard work in the farming industry. So you had cheap but food coming very much from your own farming, eating a lot of potatoes, and we also have a very strong culture overall as a national identity that it's not very common to show off your money or to show off that you're the big guy in the town. So it's more well seen that you are humble, that you have a house the same size as everybody else and the same car. So it's better to save up money for worse times than to really be a big spender. And that is also a picture you can see in the food, that you actually eat the same kind of food. It seems a little bit strange to eat oysters or very fine wines and so on. It's better to be frugality and modest, and save your money for something else than food that is just in general seen as a fuel. You have to have it in order to have your body going. So that was the general picture of the food culture in Denmark. And then I think it's 12 years ago, we had this kind of revolution about the new Nordic kitchen. And the background for the revolution, or the tendency among chefs, was that there was this focus that if you went out to a restaurant or had a fine meal, then it would be French cuisine or Italian cuisine or something foreign at least. And this circle of chefs, they decided that, well, we have some very extraordinary produce in Denmark. We have some skills in how we have prepared our foods. We have fermentation, we have sourdoughs, we have a long tradition of beer making, crafted beers. We have a long tradition of smoking. And they wanted to point out that the values of that food culture, the values of the knowledge of that kind of produce, the value of a terroir that could produce certain kind of foods better than in other terroirs, that would be actually valuable, and it could be seen as a whole way of thinking, that we should be proud of those produce, we should be proud of that handcraft that we were able to do. So that started a tendency where the restaurants decided to work with only local produce. And in the beginning, there was a lot of resistance against it. It was like, well, are we going to eat kale and sea buckthorn for the rest of our lives now? And that will never be interesting. But I'm quite sure that now Denmark is globally known for the high level of gastronomy. It's a destination for a lot of foodies that come to Denmark and have experienced this very diverse gastronomic scene that we have in Denmark, and most in Copenhagen. So I just wanted to tell you that as a background, because as I have tried to emphasize a lot of times, that Denmark do not have a national school program either. We have a very strong tradition of what we call a madpakke. It's a lunch bag. And the Danish madpakke, I've tried to find some very realistic pictures of that. And it's very far from this Nordic cuisine. It's all on the parents that make this kind of food with rye bread with something on it in the morning. And then the pupils or the students store this food in their bags all day. And then most often they have 15 minutes to eat it in the classrooms. So we don't change scenes. We don't have canteens in the schools. We don't have kitchens. It's not very prioritized to eat lunch at all in the school. It's more important to get out and move your body. So that's usually 20 minutes. So you have half an hour, a little more than half an hour break. And the short time is for eating in the classroom, and then the longer time is to go and move out and stretch your legs outside. So that is the general picture in Denmark. And every time we try to have a discussion if it should be a national food program, a school food program, the parents and a lot of politicians says no. This is a very strong declaration of love from the parents to their children. And if we should have anything in more broader terms, then it should be for poor children or something like a social intervention. So that is quite actually the general picture in Denmark. Yes, we have a small market, a commercialized market for some companies that are trying to start and say, well, we can sell school food. But then it's most often the individual schools or the municipalities that make that decision to have an offer for the parents. So it's really seen as a service offer for the parents, most often the lazy parents that are rich, so they can buy their way out of this inconvenience in making lunch bags for their students. And we have some companies, but it's not the general picture. The general picture is that it's the parents' responsibility. So it was quite a new beginning when the Copenhagen municipality in 2007 decided that they wanted a school food program within the Copenhagen. Copenhagen is the largest city in Denmark, and it was seen as a very big investment. They wanted to show what they choose a concept that could show all the beneficiary things that you can have in a school food program. So it was a very holistic view on quality, taste, and health, and involvement from the pupils. I want to stress again, the concept is not a part of a national food program, and therefore it's actually on the budget, not every year, but every 4th year. It's a decision. It's a constantly decision from the politicians in the Copenhagen municipality to decide to carry on with this investment and have this school food program. And that also means that it could be taken away if there's not enough politician that wants to carry on. The Copenhagen House of Food was asked to develop a concept that could make this holistic solution. And one of the first problem was, well, that if you look at the target group in the schools, you have boys and girls from the age from 6 or 7 until 15. And this is a schedule showing how many kilojoules they are supposed to eat following the recommendation in Denmark or the Nordic countries. There's not one for each gender in the age of 7 to 9. So that's a general recommendation. But as you can see, actually the kilojoules differ so much. So where should you, if you had a portion size, or we do have these portion size called medium and large, they are actually too much for all the students under 9 and a little bit too little for the oldest boys. So that was really the first kind of barrier for developing a system, because you can say it should be a holistic view where you looked at taste first, and you had this wish that you also wanted to make the students eat something that they weren't used to. But it should always be on the base of being healthy and following the recommendation of the state. So this was the first barrier, and it was a real puzzle to figure out how do you solve this within a very small budget, and also a high organic share. When we developed the concept, the organic share was 75%, and now it's actually 90%. So it was a big engineer work, and Emil will tell you more about how it ended up. But the other thing we also wanted to stress was that it should be part of a youth culture. So we developed an understanding that the parents or the student themselves should every day choose it. So it's not like it's just available at the schools. It's still like a commercial solution where you buy each dish on every day. There are some programs where you can buy for a whole week or a whole period, but the mindset is still that you are paying for each meal. So that's why it should be chosen. And we were convinced that it's not just the food that you are choosing, it's a whole brand or a whole identity. So we did a lot of work in looking at the youth culture and saying what is the demands there? What do they like? A fancy slogan, a logo. They like a nice places to eat and so on. So we did a lot of work that was really related to the food, but was about the whole story about the food and making a brand and an identity that it was cool to eat this food. So moving it as far as possible from this, both the service solution that it was just something for lazy parents, and also this idea that it was just something for poor people. Actually, our mindset was that if we could attract the middle class parents that were very capable of making a nice lunch bag themselves, but that they could see value of choosing this, then we would be good and we would have a steady income and a high percentage of people eating it. Yes, so these were just two of the challenges in developing in the concept, and I would like to say that if it was just the Copenhagen House of Food who could develop whatever we thought was the best solution, then we would develop what we call a food school, where we have a local canteen and a local kitchen where the children can participate in making the food. But unfortunately, because we do not have a school food culture in Denmark, there were no kitchens in the schools, and investing in building kitchen in each school, we had approximately 48 schools at that time. That was simply too big an investment. So we had made 3 schools where we had the money to build kitchens in. And then we had another concept that is called EAT. That is a central solution made in one kitchen and brought out to the different schools, and having smaller kitchens preparing the food in its final stages. So that is why we have 2 concepts. And now we luckily have more food schools, as you mentioned in the beginning. But I will leave it to Emil to tell you more about that.
Yes. Thanks, Line. So I'll start to tell you a bit more about the current situation about school food in Copenhagen, and just showing you here a little bit of the branding from the 2 concepts. First of all, I just want to start by talking a little bit about why we choose to have school food in Copenhagen, why it's important. First of all, it's very important to give good fuel for the body and mind for the kids during a long school day, which are getting longer and longer. Also in a big city like Copenhagen, but also in the whole of Denmark, we have big problems of inequality in health. So school food can be an important part of tackling that. One of the things we do for that, so it's not just for affluent families to be able to afford the school food. I'm not quite sure about what the Canadian dollar is, but in euros, on the normal price that family pay for a school meal in Copenhagen is around 3.5 euros, 3.5 to 4 euros, something like that. But we have in Copenhagen, the politicians have agreed to put aside money so we can offer free school meals or school meals at a lower price for families with a low income. So that's a very important aspect of school food, this social aspect as well. Also, the public meals can be a driver for climate change, help driving procurement in the public sector to a better place, you could say, and also hopefully teach the young generation to a better public behavior, and they can become good consumers in the future. Also, it's very important for us to create a physical and social environment at the school that supports learning and culture at the school. So just to elaborate a bit more about what Line said before, why Copenhagen has 2 solutions for school food. It's mentioned there's a lack of space at most schools in Copenhagen. You might be able to fit in a big production kitchen or a production kitchen of size, but having a eating area for the pupils to sit in is simply not feasible at many schools. Also, at the point of time where school food became a thing in Copenhagen, food kind of had to find a place in the public school. It's not something that has been normally seen as part of the school's responsibility. So it's kind of an alien force coming into a very set new environment. As said before, two different models, the eat school food and food schools. And there only used to be very few food schools when it started, but luckily it has proved to be the future model of schools. So almost all new schools being built in Copenhagen at the moment are being built as food schools. So the politicians have chosen to invest in this model. So currently we are now 16 food schools, and I think in the next 5 years or so, there's at least going to be 5 new food schools being built. And also for the eat school food, they have chosen to put aside money to build a new production kitchen. So we have good facilities to have a good solution in the future for eat. So I'm just gonna go through the two different school food solutions we have in Copenhagen. So first I'm gonna give an overview of the eat school food. Currently we have 53 eat venues at 46 schools. There's being between 5,000 and 10,000 daily meals served each day around the schools. And I've just put up a little picture. I know you can't see the dishes or understand what's on there, but just to give an idea of how the menu looks. But it can be, the eat menu varies between like popular Danish hits that the kids love and feel very familiar with. They sell a lot of dishes, and if it's something a bit more unknown, maybe also vegetarian or some. I think one of the dishes on the menu at the moment is crab bisque, and that's not one of the high sellers, I can say. But what they do also to make sure they make money, they put it next to a vegetarian lasagna. So some people might get tempted to try something new, but there's also like a safe choice, which is so they make sure that the balance is all right and kids will get fed. Since EAT is quite an expensive model to run for the municipality, it's been chosen that there should be a capacity to sell to around 30% of the students. One thing is the money thing, but it's also because some of the kitchen facilities in the schools are very small. It will be, I mean, some of the kitchens is the size of a large bedroom maybe, or something like that. And that's not possible to cook lunch for more than 150 students or something like that under those circumstances. Every day there's 2 dishes. One is always vegetarian, and they're really moving towards making more and more vegetables-based dishes and trying to reduce the meat as much as possible. But it is a product that has to be bought, so they have to take things step by step, you could say. And compared to other solutions where you only have 1 dish a day and you sign up for a whole month, EAT might put a very nice vegetarian dish on the menu, but if there's the meat option on the same day, people just sometimes tend to choose that one. So they cannot control in the same way how much meat they use in the production. Again, just to wrap up EAT, it's a central production. And then as Line said, it's finished, reheated at the schools and plated at school together with what we call an EAT crew, which is generally everything from between 6 students to a whole class that help out dish out the food. So the EAT crew is very invaluable to get the numbers up so we can sell as much food as possible. We could see during COVID when the schools were still open, but the kids were not allowed to participate in the kitchens, we really had to lower how much food we could sell because there would only be 1 person in the kitchen. So kitchens that would normally maybe dish out 300 portions would have to go down to selling only 100 portions. So they are very invaluable. Also, you saw some pictures before of kids eating in more like lounge areas. all the EAT schools have EAT lounges where the large age group or the older age groups, the older classes, whatever you say, can sit and have as their space and eat their lunch and hang out and yeah. The branding is important, and we really want to create a connection to it. And I think it's funny when you are in a school with EAT in Copenhagen, they don't ask what's for lunch, they ask what's for EAT. So it has sort of caught on in their language as well, the thing. As I said before, EAT, the way it works, many schools, it's kind of logistically complex, which makes it expensive to operate. It also makes it very important to do very down into the smallest detail, product planning, menu planning, also because of nutritional values and so on, and also product development, making sure that the food and the product is compatible to what the parents and the students want. All the kitchens around the schools are equipped equally, but obviously with different capacities, so that all the employees which are not skilled chefs, they know what to do. And also if a substitute comes in from the normal worker, they will know exactly what to do. I give an example here of the picture of one of the reheating tables of that follows up with the dishes every day. So the workers knows what oven program to put it on, what temperature, how long time, how to serve it, and so on. So we make sure that we can quality control as much as possible. Also, I just want to mention that we've gone through the years. EAT has been now on for what, 14 years or something like that, from a more decentral model to a more central model where every staff is employed centrally. And I think we have good, it's been good because it makes operation easier for schools. Before, some schools were functioning very well and some were not going too well, and it was very different who was employed in the kitchens. And now we can ensure better possibilities for networking between the workers, make better, more streamlined communications, and have opportunities to work more with work environment and staff development, which is very important to keep people in the job. And luckily we see that the workers eat in the kitchens, they have a tendency to stay for very long. So hopefully that's a good sign. Also to ensure the product development, we do focus group with the students. So they sit and eat the meals and give their evaluations around what they think of the meal and what could be changed and so on. And as much as possible, we try to change that. But again, as I mentioned before, product planning, menu planning, and all this is important. So there's a lot of factors to be taken into consideration when doing a product like EAT. So next, I'm gonna give an overview of the food schools. Currently, there are 16 food schools in Copenhagen. There's 12 so-called folkeskoler, which are the public schools in Denmark, the name of that. And there's 4, just a literal translation from Danish, special schools, but it's schools that has people with diagnosis, often ADHD or autism and so on. And there will be schools where there's maybe around 100 kids and the same amount of staff, because it's very intensive, the work they do there. So they are a lot smaller entities. Whereas a normal Danish folkeskole would probably be in the size of 600 kids to the biggest one now that are around 1,100 or 1,200 pupils. So very large ones. Food schools on average sell about 5,000 meals in total, which means that compared to EAT, that it's a lot higher percentage of the pupils that eat the food in the food schools, also because they have the capacity, but also I think because it is a more in-depth solution that can create a better product at the end, or better culture around the food. There's a decentral organization and production, so the schools are their own entities, but we have a central support and development of the schools, and that's where I come into the picture. And we also, the city, through the food strategy, has hired a private consultancy to do some of the gastronomic development work as well. with the schools in the city in general. And very importantly for the model, both models, but especially in the food schools, the students take part of the daily productions. They go through a week apprenticeship. I'll go into a bit more detail with that later. All the food, or most of the food, is organic. We have a target of that the food should be between 90 to 100% organic. There's still a few schools which have not reached that target yet, but we are working to make sure that comes into order. But yeah, organic food can be expensive on a tight budget. So we really need to focus more on that still, even though it's been a long work in Copenhagen. The food is seasonal and should always be cooked from scratch. The food school should be part of the school's identity and put a mark on the daily life and many or all aspects of the school. So that's the aim. The food school is more than a canteen, but it should be also an opportunity for learning, creating culture, and making sure health is good. In the food school, everyone eats together, which means that either you buy the food from the food school or you bring your own packed lunch, you still sit around the same table to eat the food. And yeah, I think that's just important that we are together in all the classes together around, so we create a physical space and time for eating and digesting the food, having a time off. The food school kitchen should be a practical learning space, so the kids and the chefs work together and teaching about food. And on a whole school scale, the food school hopefully helps to create an interdisciplinarity, so it becomes easier to see opportunities for the different subjects to work together, maybe centered around food. That's the aim. So just going to take the second one, I think, talk just shortly a bit more about their apprenticeships in the kitchen. So every day, normally there's around a team of 6 students in the kitchen together with the chefs, cooking the food, and as much as possible taking part of the production, serving the food, helping up cleaning. They normally start the day by having breakfast together, talk about what the menus are, talk about the different produce, all aspects about what's going on, and then they take part of the different things that needs to be done during the day. And they help up serving the food and cleaning up and so on. So they have the day in the kitchen from normally 8 o'clock in the morning until around 2 o'clock in the afternoon for a whole week. They normally go through that for 1 week each year. Sometimes at some schools, they do it once during their school life. Other schools, they will go through this apprenticeship 3 times during the school life. I wrote how to challenge students' taste. I think it comes to the planning of the menus, what type of food you do. One of the things I hear a lot from the chefs is they're very interested in serving very healthy, very seasonal, and very climate-friendly food. But you also need for the food to be eaten. I mean, it will just end up as food waste if we create menus which are too advanced, or whatever you want to say, for the kids. So it's very important that you do challenge, you do move forward, you do make change, but we still need to do it in a warm, friendly, tasteful way, so the kids, they will embrace the food and the food schools as something they like. Otherwise, they simply won't choose it. We want to integrate food and teaching as much as possible, and we try to do a lot of work. We still have a lot of work to do. This is one of the harder aspects, I would say, of running a food school, but teachers being meal ambassadors at the table and talking well about the food, trying to start a conversation about what's on the menu, and making sure everyone is having a good time, to speak it very simply. And I think that is also part of what we want to do by building democracy, having talks around the food, but also making sure that the children are being heard, in what type of food is being served and how the whole and how the school is being run. Yeah, I think coming back to the meal planning, I think one of the things the chefs do quite a lot when they're trying to implement new dishes and ways of cooking, more plant-based cooking is what I'm mainly thinking about. For example, eating more beans. Beans are the new black, I think, in Denmark and many other places. And I think that you really need to do it sort of step by step and making sure that you slowly introduce new raw materials, or wrong word, but produce and new dishes, so they get part of the kids' vocabulary, you might say. Also, one of the things to try and do in the food schools and having apprenticeships. This time, I don't mean with the kids, but also having chefs apprentices or canteen staff apprenticeships, or apprenticeship from people being on the borderline of the work field in Denmark. So it's important that we can use the kitchens also for that, and there's space. It's the space for many different kinds of people in the kitchens. Again, school food should help to battle inequality in health, both through making sure it's affordable for everyone, but also making sure that people get the right nutrition, get a possibility to taste good food, and not just bland, boring food, which sadly is the case in many families. Also, the public meals and therefore also school food can help create a solution to the limitation there is in public procurement rules and in the market. And I think we try, well, that's one of the things we're going to focus on in the future, how we can mix teaching materials to being with different produce, so we can start doing procurement from smaller farms and make sure that works together. I can, if you have more questions on that, I'm glad to elaborate in the Q&A session. But I think that's really interesting because that's something that's lacking at the moment. Now it's mainly possible to buy the food through big wholesalers or one big wholesaler. And for the interested, we're working in Copenhagen at the moment and over the next 4 years with the implementation of our food strategy for the whole city. And that tackles, as I mentioned, or was mentioned before, we want to reduce the climate footprint of the public meals, but also make sure that taste, quality, food appreciation is being put in focus, and social communities are being in focus. And I think it's nice that the politicians have signed to this policy, because if we want to do this in the public institutions, it's something that needs constant work, and that makes it a lot easier when the politicians have given their thumbs up. As Line also mentioned earlier, things, every 4th year, things are up for negotiation, so this helps with that. School engagement is an important aspect. As I said before, everyone eats together. We want to create space and time for eating, talking, relaxing. A good school meal and good structures around the mealtime creates, I think, the right structure for the whole school day, and make sure you have a good school culture, and school food helps that going. The kitchen should be part of the daily life at the schools, and the chefs should be familiar faces to the kids, and there should be a good eye-to-eye communication between these. And I think that's what we really see at the food schools, and also in EAT, that the kids always come running down in their 10 o'clock breaks. Oh, what's for dinner, or what's for lunch, and so on. And they come down to say if they didn't like something, and having all that makes it very homely at the school, or helps that. Again, teachers as ambassadors, and that's something we really want to work more with in the city, that how we can add more tools and resources to the teachers to get them to take more ownership and engage more. But that's a hard thing. As I said in the beginning, the food is still a relatively new concept in the Danish school system. And since there's not any national guidelines for school food or any policies on a national level, it's more you have to see them, you have to make them see the light. It's not something you can force upon them as such. So we really want to create more, more opportunities for that. But I think Morten is going to go into more detail with stuff like this. And just finally, I think it's important that you have local adjustments around the 16 different food schools. They're very different schools. So you have to have them take ownership of the school food themselves, or of the organization themselves. Obviously at the 4 special schools, which have a very different situation, they have a lot smaller kitchens than the others and a fewer kids to cook for, but they have opportunities which the others don't have, but they also have some limitations with what they can do. One of the schools, that's actually the special school, has a very nice garden. They use that a lot in their teaching with the kids, and that's good opportunity to work with. Also, some of the schools are very good at opening up to the local environment and do folk kitchens or inviting in parents and stuff like that. Some of the schools have their own local meal policies, which helps that there are clear rules that the teachers know, the chefs know, the kids know. So I think it's just a way to say that the leadership at the schools, it's very important that they take a responsibility when it comes to this, so it will trickle down over the whole organization. And then some schools have also made food school councils, which is a council of students, teachers, and the chefs, which talk about school and the meals, how things should be done. And I think, yeah, that's very good, because that helps the democracy around the food school, and making sure that we're in line with what the kids want. So that was all for me. Thank you very much for your attention. So giving the microphone over to Morten.
Yes. Thank you, Emil. Thank you for that thorough deepening of the concepts. And I would just mention that when we were so lucky that we had researchers to look at our concepts when we develop it. And Morten was one of those researchers, and he has also worked with the school food since, so he's bringing some perspective to it.
Thank you very much, Line. And we have agreed upon that you will be controlling the slides, because I'm far away from Copenhagen. So I'll just raise my hand and then you go to the next slide.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And hi, everybody. I'm very excited to be here. And I have structured my presentation I would like to invite for reflection and discussion around 3 topics, central topics related to school food in Denmark. In the first topic, I will introduce 3 central typologies that show how school food has developed over time historically, with different ideological reasoning, and also stress some central paradoxes around school food in Denmark. In the second topic, I will outline how food in recent years increasingly has gained momentum as a vehicle for learning, you can say as a pedagogical or didactic resource. And in the third final topic, I will dig into the way we talk about and conceptualize food in schools, and introduce the term food Bildung that has many similarities to the term food literacy that is widely used internationally. And then finally, I will look at the wider educational political context and current trends, and how this impacts our efforts to unfold the big potentials that we know school food can offer. Yes, please. Like both Line and Emil have stressed, we have we can say a paradox around school food in Denmark, that despite we have a highly developed welfare society with practically half our workforce working in the public sector, the packed lunch culture prevails in most municipalities. And food in schools continues to be a private responsibility of parents, with continuous inequality as a consequence. But as Line also stressed, there has been some different initiatives around school food programs that are interesting to look at. And if you, despite this paradox, look at them, you can look at this typology that originally was developed by the Danish National Board of Health in 1999, which is informative to understand also how the area has developed historically. The first typology is to see food as a liberal enterprise, where food is a commodity and students are primarily have a role as consumers. So they have to buy this good, which is the food. The second type is food as a social welfare project, where the provision of food is a means to promote equality in health. Here students are primarily receivers of a public good. And the third typology, which has emerged mainly in the last 20 years, food is used as a pedagogical project where food is not only produced with the participation of students, it is also framed as a didactic resource. And here you have the term food building, which is a very interesting development that I will return to in a minute. So you can say that this typology shows a historical development. It also reflects a simultaneity. So it's also something that can exist at the same time. For instance, if you look at the Copenhagen school models, you can say that it contains all of these different understandings of school food. It is both a commodity, it is a social good or welfare that wants to counter inequality, but it's definitely also a pedagogical project. So yes, next slide. So one of the trends that have emerged, I can say, where school food in the form of feeding programs not has gained a national momentum yet. Actually, the area has been more or less standing still for the past 20 years. Another tendency is that that has grown stronger is an increasing number of initiatives that see food as a vehicle for learning. So we're talking about food as something that we can teach with and through. The first very important change or thing that happened a few years ago is that home economics has been transformed into a new subject called food knowledge, with more lessons and demands for teachers' qualifications, and also the possibility of putting an exam in the older classes. So it used to be a subject that has survived, contrary to other countries, but now it has really politically gained more momentum. And then also in the past 10 years, we have seen a booming of school gardens, like in other Western countries in Denmark. But here we have a specific model that is maybe different from other countries because it also includes cooking and is based on whole day visits with emphasis on cross-disciplinary learning. So kids are in the school garden for a whole day. Then another interesting thing is taste didactics or taste pedagogy that has emerged as a new field based on research in the role of senses around our choices of food. And it invites us to see taste as a vehicle for developing critical awareness instead of something that has to be fixed so that kids make the right choices. So there's a lot of critical studies about how tastes could be used more progressively, you can say. And then there's the UN Sustainable Development Goals, as well as a politically prioritized goal to open the school to the local society. That was also stressed in the school reform we had a few years ago. We also see this is an area where food is showing its potential for opening the schools to the local food environment and food system. Then one of the few things the government level has done, apart from prioritizing home economics, is that they have launched a national training program for teachers about food building for teachers in many subjects. But it's something teachers have to pay for, the municipalities have to pay for it and find the time for it. So that's a part of the frame for that. And finally, there's a very interesting school food model called the LOMA, local food model, that is kind of has moved on from inspired from international studies where food school food is seen also as something that could promote local food production. So they work with local sourcing, and students are in these schools are also engaged, like in Copenhagen, in the production, and it is also integrated in many different subjects. Yes, change. So now we come to the more conceptual, theoretical part of my presentation. And there are kind of there are two scholars that I would like to introduce to. Some of you may know them. They have also been publishing in English, and I will, in my references, I put some English literature that you can look into if you find this interesting. They are both anchored in the research of home economics in Denmark, so they are big names when it comes to home economics and food in schools in Denmark. The first one is Jette Ben, and her elaborations on the term of food Bildung, we call it food dannelse, is a very central concept to understand the way we approach food in schools in Denmark. The interesting word is that we have they in their writings they reflect upon that you don't have a word in English that reflects the same broad approach to education that we find in Danish and in German with the word Bildung. So they have chose to use the German word in order to say this is not just education, it's so much more. It's a very broad idea of what education should be about and how it should prepare students not just to pass good in the tests, but also to become active and participating citizens. So that shows a bit about the whole, you can say, educational, political, and ideological idea of what this is about. The first one, Ben, is inspired by Paulo Freire and his works about education as something that should empower students to read the world. And she uses this as an asset or as a set-off to talk about food Bildung as something that can help students to read the world through food. And she talks about 5 different competencies that all should be addressed in a learning process. So it's about knowing, it's about working with the student sense of coherence, their knowledge and decision making. It's also about doing, it's about everyday life competences and practical skills. It's about acknowledging the role of senses, so the aesthetic dimension. It's both impression and expression. How do we talk about it? And we have a very interesting term that has developed in the past 2 years according to this focus is food courage, which is about actually allowing kids to show courage when it comes to food. And that is something that in itself can prove very creative in a learning process. We can see that in many studies in school gardens and all over, that just this approach to food as something that is something you dare, that you actually can transgress some limits, is a very interesting area to work with when it comes to inspiring and motivating kids around food. Then it's about wanting, it's about responsibility and willingness to participate. It's about citizenship and democracy that Emil also talked about. It's about, this is not just about what happens in the kitchen, it's also about society, and it's about inspiring kids to take part actively in decisions around also their own circumstances and life situations. Finally, it's about care and taking care of, it's about ethics for oneself, for society and environment change. And the second scholar is Helle Brøndum Carlsen, who's also has a lot of interesting contributions to the way we talk about food in school. Her inspiration is the German. It's actually all back to the German philosopher Kant, but it's the recent educational philosopher Klafki, German philosopher, and his idea about the larger project of education is to produce critical citizens that are empowered to make self-decisions, co-decisions, and engage in democracy with solidarity. And she also talks about some dimensions that all should be addressed if you are to promote this holistic idea of becoming, or education that is in this idea of Bildung. She has a bit different priorities because she's very interested in the aesthetics. So her first point is about pleasure and sense-oriented treatment of the body. So it's about taking it serious, that food is also about pleasure and senses. It is also about rejection and dislike and stuff like that. So acknowledging these more embodied aspects of how we approach food is very important. Then again, it's about productivity, being actually able to do this with your hands, how to use tools and stuff like that. It's about cognitive possibilities. It's about developing language, communicating about it, and the aesthetics about judging what you like, what you don't like, stuff like that, and making the ability to make ethical and political decisions and conduct political and ethical action. So there is this action-oriented aspect in it. It's not just talking about it, it's actually experimenting. So it's also a call for experiential learning. And then finally, possibilities of relations to fellow human beings. So it's the whole sociality of the meal, of the sociality of food production and stuff like that. So if you look at the Copenhagen school food models, you can say these understandings of food Bildung are very much alive, and because they have been intensely debated and continue to be, because it's not something that is that much integrated in the teacher education in Denmark, but it's still something we have to fight for and argue for, that it's actually a very relevant participation contribution from this food Bildung area to the wider educational goal of empowering our students to participate in democracy. And then the final one, almost the final one. So here is very interesting for those of you who have been listening to this and think, oh, this sounds very much like the way I think food literacy is. And yes, that is possibly, that's correct, you can say, because there are a lot of similarities when it comes to food Bildung and food literacy. Yet Ben has made a very interesting literature review about the way food literacy is understood in different studies and interventions globally. And I will not have time to run through this table in detail, but there are some comments on how some of the general points. So she has analyzed this large number of studies, how they use the concept of food literacy, and her findings highlight two general approaches to the term as either broad or narrow. So the broad understandings are characterized by this contextualizing food in its wider relations and emphasizing student empowerment on a collective or societal level, which is very close to the food Bildung ambitions we talk about in the Danish context. And then the more narrow understanding, you could say it's more the nutritionist classic idea about just knowing food literacy as something that is about individuals' knowledge, and then it's up to their own responsibility to make some changes that are necessary. So it is criticized, this narrow approach, to be very micro level, also to be very oppressive and gendered and just directed as girls, as a very traditional idea of it being something that is for the household, females in the household. And the final slide is, like, you can say, what I also think I have said, but it's important to see Ben's and Carlsen's understandings of food Bildung and food literacy. It is both reality and it is also a vision. So it's something that we have been striving for, but you can say, if you look to the Copenhagen school food models, it's definitely something that is very much good on its way. But even as Emil says, there's a lot of continuous effort to actually have a dialogue with teachers to actually approach it in this broad sense, that where it can actually unfold its potentials. So the concepts are relevant to understand the current trends around food in schools in Denmark, and also the big focus we have in our country about involving students in whole processes and in creating authentic learning environments. Kids are in the kitchen. It's a very natural idea. Of course, they are in the kitchen. There are no rules that actually prevent them, because we have there are all the hygienic restrictions are taken care of and stuff like that. And this more growing idea that food has potential because it has a relevance as a vehicle for opening the world for kids, and to help the students to be more than just students, but also or consumers of buying the school food, also to have them reflect on their also responsible and participating citizens. And that goal, you can say, correlates very much with the general goal of schooling in Denmark. That's actually one of the biggest goals we have at school. It's not just to teach the kids to be good in exams, it's also to teach them to become good democratic citizens. So finally, you can say, when it comes to the educational political context, we also have seen a change in educational policy in Denmark, where we've had now at least 10 or 15 years where there has been a lot of focus on evidence and teaching to the test, and this very narrow idea of learning, which has proven not to actually bring us the kind of the change that we have been wanting, that more kids succeed in school. So now there's kind of a momentum to return to the more old traditions, broad traditions of schooling as Bildung, and it's definitely not an effort to make the school less academic, but approach this academic and theoretical understanding of the world through a teaching that is more hands-on. And there we can say that the strong approaches that you can see in the Copenhagen school food models are definitely showing a way to make the school more interesting, especially for the kids in the older classes, by this very strong tradition of involving them in whole process, in something that matters and is real, and that can inspire and motivate students to engage. So yes, I would be very interested in hear your comments on this, and whether Canada needs some of the aspects of Bildung. And when it comes to the use of food system, I'm one of the people in Denmark that think this is one thing that we can learn from this more, you can say, political, problematic approach you have especially in the US and Canada, about thinking about food system as something that should be addressed in schools also. That's something that maybe we could emphasize more in Denmark. And I have also been arguing for using that term in our own language in order to promote our goal of having food education as something that can inspire students and open and empower them to participate in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Morten. Yes, we are open for questions now. We hope it's been enlightening story about the Copenhagen school food and the Denmark food culture in general.
Well, I'll jump in. Amberley, who is one of our researchers, was very keen to have you come and share your experience, even though you don't have a harmonized national program. And of course, it's hearing it, I can see why Amberley was so keen, because you are combining some of the key things that are happening in Canada too. Those of us who did not have a welfare-based World War II poverty program and have had the opportunity then to create at the grassroots level are creating a different kinds of programs. And there's a lot of similarity between many of our programs in Canada and yours. So that's been very useful to hear. I am intrigued to think politically what we can do together in Denmark and Canada as we move forward in these next few months, because I would imagine that you also think that though this great experimentation and this wonderful investment from the city of Copenhagen is great, that eventually you would have a vision for all children in Denmark. And I think this new coalition globally might allow you to begin that conversation. And, it's been, that Finland is playing a really important role in this. And so that's interesting. And of course, Sweden's program is very different than yours and has a different history. And of course, you alluded to all the reasons why parents may have rebelled against a program before, who may not now. I think especially with what we know about the health crisis, and of course all the really incredibly positive examples that Morten has given us with citizenship, or we don't use that term because of the issues of refugees in our country, but of being involved as a participant in your democratic school system. So anyway, I just hope this is the beginning of more conversations. I'm going to put in the chat for everybody just this recent conversation, but love you to reflect on how you think you can use this momentum and whether COVID provides momentum, because for us, COVID has provided momentum. We can now say that COVID has demonstrated that school food is an essential service. So wonder what did happen when the schools were closed. Do you have any thoughts on how you will be able to expand? And the Global Coalition has actually a marker of 2023. So by 2023, bring all school food programs back to pre-COVID levels. By 2030, move all countries that are currently dependent on outside aid to be fully funded within their own countries. and by 2030 to, and this is for the global north, to create quality programs for all children. And their slogan is every school meal, oh, I've lost it, but anyway, every day school meal for every kid kind of thing. So just curious if you have any thoughts on COVID, and will this open doors or close doors for you?
I think I would definitely see COVID has been a big setback at the schools, because all the good sort of everyday habits, how we do things, because what happened during COVID was when the schools were still open, they have to portion everything at the food school. So serve it in a box, which meant that suddenly you went away from eating together the whole school to going up into your classroom again, which puts restrictions of what you can do. So I think what the schools now is to get back into that normality and getting the teachers back on board. And also COVID just puts a lot of restrictions on school life. But I do think that is going to come, but it will take an effort for sure. And we are very aware of that. But obviously I think what really needs to have a big focus at the schools is to invest enough energy, because I just think that the food is so integral to this, because you do it every day. There's almost something performative in doing it, because you sit down together every day and eat the lunch. So if that doesn't function in a good way, where whether your teacher, your kid, your school leader, whoever you are, that doesn't function, it will create a lot of problems. So we do need to find that, find the right energy. But I cannot say I don't think it's a catalyst for like COVID, but I really hope that we can get back to normal ways, and hopefully people are happy just to be back together in the schools, and that will put more emphasis on social issues regarding school food, or whatever you can say. I don't know if we should take some of the questions from the chat and answer now. I can see there's first a question from Gary. Do you work with any post-secondary schools or external organizations? From Copenhagen, I mean, the thing is, at least for the city of Copenhagen, we are the post-secondary schools in Denmark is not a municipal, it's not part of our responsibility, you could say. So we don't really have an opportunity to work with them. I know of very little high schools or whatever it could be that do work with food, but I have heard of some more colleges. Obviously the catering colleges do a lot, but also other colleges who has been working to do more organic food, vegetarian food, and so on with the students. But it's more, and it just calls for why we need something a bit more national, because of the organizations, but not to my knowledge, it's not something that is too widespread in Denmark, but there are a few examples of it. And we have a question from Jill, who thanks us. Thank you very much for a great presentation. And she asked a bit about the food school councils or other vehicles address ethnocultural diversity, or is that lens already built in? I'm not too sure how big an issue on the agenda it is. I know for sure that the schools in Copenhagen have very ethnocultural diverse. They're very ethno-diverse. Yeah, they have a big diversity in the schools, so they put that a lot into to how they cook. I mean, they do a lot of world cuisine, you could say. Also, because if you want to eat vegetables in an interesting way, you really need to put some spice under it. And I think also some schools, they put a theme on each week during the school year. Then they will have different cultural weeks and cook food for it's Italy or Uganda or Mexico or something like that. Also to put in the learning aspects and getting more to know that. But also to the food they serve, most of the meat in all the schools, I think 100% of all the meat is halal butchered. So everyone will be able to eat it. And I think, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's addressed very vocally at the schools as such, also because I think in Denmark, the political climate it can create headlines if you are being a bit too vocal about it, especially regarding pork. I mean, there's been some big headlines in the tabloids if public institutions have chosen not to serve pork. There are a lot of people who get very angry with this and so on. So it's not something we advertise, for example, that with big headlines that the meat is halal butchered, but we just simply do it that way because it was best for the customers, you could say, or makes it easiest for the production, because and so on. So I think it is thought in as such, and is, yeah.
I can add that in the beginning we actually decided that the full concept should be only halal and no pork. But we got some of those headlines that from the right-wing party that was not part of the Danish food culture to have all pork out of the menus. So we do have some pork dishes, and that is of course not halal butchered within the menu. But yeah, it was more an issue of practicality and making sure that the meal was including for everybody, that we shouldn't have different portions for different persons. But we were forced to put in pork to make sure the right-wing party were happy as well.
Hopefully that answered the question. So we have one more question. Does the Copenhagen municipality provide any funding? And yes, they do. As I said, the price the parents pay is around, now I saw $5 Canadian a meal is the standard price. But the actual price, if you put in every production cost, is probably more around 10 to 8 Canadian dollars. So yeah, the city puts in quite a bit. I think in total, it must be, with my calculation of money, it must be something about 10-12 million Canadian dollars that the city puts in to operate school food every year in total. And then on top of that, I can say that a food school production kitchen to equip that is probably around 10 million Canadian dollars as well, just as a start. But that is a good investment because I think every meal in a school food, when it comes to operation costs, is actually a third of the cost of when you do the eat school food, where you have to cook and chill and then distribute it out to the schools and do all this. So on an operational level, it's a good investment to spend that much on the school food. And also, as Line said, I mean, it's always up to political negotiations to whether to continue with the public school food system. But I think when you have invested so much money in the schools and having the things, it's also going to be harder to take it off the table again. But you never know what's going to happen. But I have hopes.
Yeah, and that's that goes over to Gary's question here, where there is no national funding. It is all put on the single municipality or the single school that decides that they want to have school food. So yeah, it's quite a big investment for these, and that is also why it's so important that Copenhagen show the way with a bigger concept to show the other municipalities, the smaller cities, that there is reason to invest in this, and that can make the calculation all the way and say and show what it means in terms of having a lot of students eating the food in the end.
Mm.
And Gary also asks about Aarhus and Odense, and I know that Odense is actually my city, and they have no plans like this. That's the third largest city, and the second largest city is Aarhus. And to my knowledge, maybe you know more about that, Line and Emil, but they have actually decided to make production kitchens in the majority.
They have just decided to do so.
Yeah, so that's very good news.
Yeah.
I think just from the Canadian context, our largest city of Toronto, decades ago, started with a very small investment and is up to 15 million a year to creating supports from a public health view of this. It doesn't make any sense from a jurisdiction point of view. And I think, in Japan, it is the municipality that does most of the funding. So I do believe, and what we know from food policy from Brazil and many countries, municipal action can lead to increased leadership at other levels. And even trying to get, like we're working with a concept of federal regulation in a cost shared model. So that's we use the language of cost shared, universal, healthy school food program for all Canadian children. And, we used to say 20/20 share, city, province, feds. Now we say more like 50 maybe from the feds, 50 from the provinces. What role parents will play is a big conversation that we're having because we want to not discriminate. But a lot of the most creative programs in Canada right now are lunch programs that are called Pay What You Can, where a child can participate with no stigma, and their parents can put in a penny or $5 for the meal in a software, because software, of course, makes this possible. One of our smallest provinces, PEI, has just launched a universal healthy school Pay What You Can program. So, it would be interesting to think about what role guidelines or where is there a federal lens? We learned from the Italian webinar that there's about 5 places federally where the Italian government comments on school food, environment, social policy, health, education. So, of course, very different structure for you in Denmark, but just even trying to get your foot in the door to ask for implementation of the food guide. What is the food guide? I don't know. Is there a new food guide in Denmark that accounts for a more plant-based diet? Do you have that?
Yes, we have a national nutritional recommendation that have just been released last year, where you have a larger focus on plant-based. Yeah,
and that has been a big
some Nordic regulations for children.
Yeah, so that's a big door opener for us too, because if there can be a federal guide, which we have a great one with a glass of water. Do you have a glass of water or a glass of milk? How did that go with the
I think the milk is still there for the young ones. One out of the
Gupta, who's helped to organize so much of this call, has just recently airbrushed out a lot of milk. Our homepage has a great new shot with kids eating in a school in New Brunswick where we airbrushed the milk out, because for the first time we were able to convince the federal government to keep dairy and beef and everybody out of the table and have it be just science-based. So we have one like Brazil, half a plate of vegetable and fruit and a glass of water.
Yeah. Gary also asked if there's what the difference between the EAT and the food schools is just the way they produce food. And the EAT schools have a fixed menu for 3 months at a time, where the food schools decide for themselves what to put on the menu. And then the very big difference is this apprenticeships, that we have a group of students participating in the kitchens with the chefs and producing the food and being quite necessary for the whole thing to be functioning. When the EAT schools, these EAT crew are more helpful in putting out the food and putting them on the plates and so on. So there are more food building in the food schools.
Yeah, and also just because of that I mean, they have to portion size it, and then it will be put into boxes and brought up to the classroom where they eat. So you can say in the EAT schools you eat in a more traditional Danish sense, the same place that the teaching goes on. Whereas in the school food we have canteen spaces or dining areas, as we prefer to call them. So you sit together and eat at long tables, and you can take as much or little food as you like.
Morten?
There is also the very interesting thing in EAT schools that you have these lounges that are especially designed by students for the older students, to create a space for youth culture around food. And actually the picture we're looking at is from a lounge, as far as I can see, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
So it's like this, to create this space for exclusivity as a part of this branding strategy to actually win the struggle with the food, the street. Sorry,
Yeah.
you phrase it like that. To win the battle with the street food, we have to create a space where kids choose to stay at school and eat the food there. And that I think was very progressive part of the EAT program when it was launched 12 years ago, to have this youth culture space around food at the schools.
Yes.
I have a question I'd like to ask, kind of a follow-up to a conversation that Lena and I had a few months back when you were first telling me of the model, and how my understanding was that the first initial investment from the City of Copenhagen was partly tied to some new ecological goals of bringing down CO2 emissions, and how because of the Danish value around public meals and how public meals are often served in institutions across hospitals and other public institutions, and that's being a central value, that was a catalyst for investment and making that also in the school food program, right? So my question is really around, I guess it's twofold. One is to hear more from Emil about the local sourcing and what's being done there, and trying to move from more of that catering model, or sorry, the large scale model to incorporate some local procurement. And if you see that being a conversation at the municipal and the national level to talk about how schools could actually be a conduit to local procurement and economic development, if that could also bolster conversation support around expanding the model, not only in Copenhagen, but in other municipalities as well.
Very good question. It is definitely something we want to work with more. I think the big difference from maybe Canada to Denmark is that there are very strict EU rules on procurement and how you need to do procurement deals. So we have to put out a tender for everything, for all the produce being bought in the city of Copenhagen each year, out to one big wholesaler. Or I say one now, there could be more, but at the moment we kind of almost have a monopoly, because that means delivering food every day fresh out to 1,000 different sites. So that sort of limits the scope of who can bid for that, sadly. The good thing about doing that is that we have some very good people sitting in the procurement department, which are actually some of the best, I think, in the EU, or trying to do, how can we think more openly about how can we be maybe a bit more creative. So I think in the newest tender, or the newest deal that was done, they managed to put in a lot of climate targets, aspects of how to battle food waste, also put in ways. They took out specific targets from the, I forgot the name, but
Is the sustainable development
goals. Sustainable development goals of the UN that they have to try and live up to, and so on. So I mean, there's always good and bad about putting everything into one, but yeah, the thing, just to the question with small local farmers, as I shortly mentioned a bit, we're trying to work a bit more with that. And in the EU law, if you do it with sort of an educational purpose and you create an educational material, you are able to break the procurement into smaller specific ones. So we're going to start off next year by putting out a tender for potatoes, and then hopefully we can put out into more specific vegetable groups and get that from specific local farmers. And that is something that a lot of different cities and other countries look at. But it's something that the schools really want, and they're very angry they can only buy from the from the big one. So that is a big problem we have. Morten, sorry.
Yes, I have a little recommendation, is that to look at the Loma model that I also stressed briefly in my presentation, which is located in a small coastal municipality of Svendborg on Funen. They have done some very interesting pioneering work when it comes to actually using the space of the EU regulations to actually make some tenders that can end up with having local sourcing being arranged. And they have tried to make some, what you call it, demands about the producers being able to be part of the learning environment. So they're actually going not just to deliver the vegetables and the meat and stuff, the fish, stuff like that. They also are obliged to be part of the teaching and also open their production sites for schools, for the school to come out and have study tours and stuff like that. And that is actually, yeah, it is happening. And it's also this model, which is like only, I think, in 5 municipalities now. And it has struggled to actually find funding for expansion. But this idea that school food also can be like developing local food production and creating workplaces and have our students to be more interested in this area for their future training and education is also something that is on the plate in some municipalities, but it could be so much more. And I'm very excited to hear that Copenhagen is going that way too now.
Thanks so much. That was excellent. It's a personal interest of mine. My research lies in that scope. So I really appreciate learning about that. I know there's been some innovation here in Canada with trying to get around some of our own unique procurement guidelines and being able to actually change the criteria for which bids are contracted on and evaluated on. There was actually a way to actually bolster some local producers scoring higher on the procurement bid because of some of the other qualities they were able to advocate for. So, and how that's tied into the hospital procurement system here, and how as a result, they were able to get bigger contracts for some more mid-scale producers. So I think it's interesting to think creatively about how sometimes changing the rules of the game impacts the outcome if we can think creatively about how to do that. So what a great conversation. Thanks for the response.
I think we have answered the questions in the Q&A. Yes.
I have a little question about teachers. Rather than hiring in new staff, one of my own instincts is that creating school food hubs that are integrated, functioning, you know, all the great stuff that Morten shared and that both Lena and Emil, you've spoken about, like a whole environment, can actually be done best if it is actually integrated fully into the curriculum and delivered by teachers rather than outside staff. And some of our most exciting experiments in Canada, you know, in Nunavut, which is in our far north, a teacher has convinced her principal to let her just work with the grade 11 students and cook for the whole school 3 days a week. She's already paid by the school board. The children are there, they can clean up and they learn, the high school students, and it's very transformative. And it also is allowing for seal and fish and all integration of country food, which is a big, we haven't spoken of this, I'm sure it's an issue in Denmark, but a big part of our work is to ensure Indigenous food sovereignty over school food programs and not create a residential school dynamic where the federal government swoops in and does a very bad top-down program. So I mean, again, this is very much connected to all that you've spoken about, committees at each school and a grassroots movement. And again, your incredible instincts on children and parents wanting this program rather than it being the top-down rebellion model, which we heard actually in the Scottish webinar, which was a bit of, anyway, is there any movement in Denmark from the teachers unions, from high school teachers? Do you see any of this as a desire from teachers who can see what Morten spoke about in terms of from con to free area?
My experience is that there are from individual teachers, but in general, it's actually seen as something that are not are taking an investment away from more educational purposes. I found that the teachers really have to be explained all this talk about Bildung, because in the beginning, when we are talking about the concept, if we ask the teachers, why did you become a teacher? Most of them would answer, it's because I desire to make the children a whole person and who are able to function in the world as a good citizen. And when we ask them, are there room for that in your normal education? And they say, no, it's full of tests and we really need this place where we can discuss life and normal issues and taking care of yourself. And we were like, well, the lunch break is such a place. It makes room for a talk that is not about testing or calculating or reading or anything. It's where everybody can be equal for just 20 minutes and say what they experience eating the meal. And when we get through that talk, most of the teachers got it and were participating in it. But I would say there was a lot of resilience in the beginning and still are in other municipalities.
Yeah, and I think it's an area that will need new resources, which is not there, and that's also why we need to call for national/federal action, because there needs to be put money into the school system for the teachers to be allocated hours and extra hours for taking extra, learn more about it and so on. We were lucky to get an EU grant, which of $1 million. And we're going to allocate most of that money into the teachers and try and do more. And I think Morten told about that, as he said, that there's now a course in the teachers' education they can take about food building, which is something we're definitely going to look at. And we're also gonna try and put in Loma into that, learn from them, and maybe use some of their resources in that project, because they have some, you could say, what we say is that the Copenhagen House of Food, when they started the food schools and eat in Copenhagen, they went kind of through the kitchen door, whereas Loma has done the other way around, and they went through the school door and created a concept through that way. And I think that's very interesting and something, but we need more resources to be successful, and hopefully we'll get that.
Also, when you talk about this national vocational training initiative, which was actually initiated by the Ministry of Education 3 years ago by the former center-right government we had. Now we have a center-left, or whatever you can call it. It's a social democratic government. And I was the leader of this program until last year, and it's very surprising and also a bit depressing, I would say, that you have a thing that is initiated by one government, and then you have an election, and all the money is still there, and now we have to make all the use of the political level to actually promote this is a good idea. Then they don't want to do it because that was something that was decided by the former government. So we were allowed to finish the project, but we didn't have any of this. We didn't have this political support that is normal when the government uses 3 million Danish crowns to do something. So that's also an interesting part of it, how it can become lost between two chairs, as we say in Danish. But the program is still there, and there has really been developed some very interesting, innovative materials that can actually promote this to anchor food in the teaching in different subjects. And that is definitely a way to go, to have teachers.
Giver os et flot shot af ham.
So I wasn't sure whether Amberley was going to end, but I guess I'll jump in and end. Thank you for attending our webinar. We have recorded this, and we've gotten quite a few notes from people who wanted to come but couldn't come. And we really hope that this is the beginning of more conversations with all of you. And what I was going to say, just as everything was frozen there, was that in terms of the teachers, one of the things that's very exciting about Dr. Bundy, and I hope you follow up with him and join his international consortium on research. His argument is that it is the researchers that need to build the case for government, and that's the way it's going to go. And so building the case of why teachers will have a better impact if they do teach literacy and the health impacts and all that. So we need, and it's great that you have so many researchers involved in your group too. Amberley, did you want to say anything else?
Just to close with my sincere thanks for today. Yeah, it was really wonderful to hear more. And to echo Debbie, I would love to keep in contact and further that, and keep reading more of the research once it's translated. It's going to be fascinating to follow up. So thank you so much for today.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.